She said it like she was offering a new flavor of wine. Just lifted her gaze from her phone, eyes casual, voice smooth. What if we tried dating other people? Just for perspective. That was the whole sentence. No build-up, no warning. Like we were just talking about switching laundry detergents. I was sitting across from her, sorting through some paperwork from the office. Background noise, something dull enough to ignore. But now the room turned sharp. I didn't react. Not right away. She kept her expression soft, like she just thought of it. But her eyes didn't flicker. No hesitation. I knew that look. It was the same expression she wore in board meetings when she'd already made a decision but wanted to make someone else feel like they were part of it. I leaned back slightly in my chair and studied her. Her wine glass hung from 2 fingers, her legs crossed comfortably. She wasn't nervous. That was the real tell. This wasn't a spontaneous idea. It was a move she'd been rehearsing. The calm delivery, the half-smile, those weren't curiosity. Those were cover. For perspective, she repeated, setting her glass down and folding her arms lightly. You know, just to explore. See who we are outside of each other. It could be good for us. She used the word us, like it still meant something. I nodded once, not agreement, not even acknowledgement. Just a small tick to keep the silence from getting suspicious. What made you think of that? I asked, voice level. She shrugged. Been reading about it. A few couples we know are experimenting with it. Sometimes we get in ruts, you know? Ruts. That's what she called the life we built together. A 10-year marriage, 3 apartments, 1 home, 2 career changes, 100 dinners shared in quiet understanding. That was a rut. I didn't correct her. I didn't flinch. Instead, I asked how she pictured it working. She smiled a little wider, reassured by my tone. We keep things honest. Check in. Set rules, obviously, boundaries. Just a little room to breathe, that's all. No secrets. That phrase came up twice. I watched her closely. She wasn't asking. She was confessing, just not in words. Something had already begun. This wasn't permission-seeking. It was preemptive framing. She wanted me to think we were beginning something together, when really, she was trying to make sure I wouldn't question what she'd already done. She reached for her wine again. I mean, I still love you. That's not in question. This is about growth. Expansion. Expansion. A corporate word for drift. I stood up, slow, controlled, and walked to the kitchen to rinse out my coffee mug. I took my time with it, the sound of the running water giving me an excuse to not fill the space with conversation. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. But something in me shifted. Not in fear. There was nothing uncertain about what was happening. It was clarity. When I came back, I sat next to her on the couch and rested my hand on the armrest, not on her knee like I usually would. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did but didn't care. That was its own kind of answer. She leaned her head against my shoulder. It was familiar, practiced, but it felt performative now, an echo of a connection she'd already loosened. I kept my body still, let the contact happen without returning it. After a moment she asked, You okay? I smiled softly. Just thinking. She nodded, satisfied with that. No follow-up, no curiosity. That night in bed, she reached for me like everything was normal. Like the words she'd spoken earlier were already folded into our shared script, part of the evolving narrative of a modern marriage. I let her hold my hand, let her settle into me. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. She believed she'd steered the conversation, that she'd controlled the terms. What she didn't see, what she never anticipated, was that I'd already made my choice. I wasn't going to chase someone else. I wasn't going to compete or compare or retaliate. I was going to start with myself. If she wanted to date other people, fine, let her. But I wasn't going to be one of the versions of me she dated in passing. The passive, compromising, shape-shifting man I'd become under her preferences and schedules and rules. No. If she wanted to explore, I would too. But I'd begin with the version of myself she forgot to count in this arrangement. And this time, I'd be the one setting the rules. 3 days later, the first clue arrived in soft pink. I found the shopping bag tucked under the bathroom sink, too carefully hidden to be accidental, too out of place to be ignored. Inside, a carefully folded set of delicate sleepwear, tags still on. Not the kind she wore for comfort or subtlety. This was deliberate. Styled. Purchased for impact. I didn't react. I didn't ask. Instead, I slid the bag back exactly as I'd found it, turned off the light, and walked out like nothing had shifted. That's the trick, stay quiet long enough, and people show you everything. She wanted me to trust her? Fine. I'd let her feel safe in that assumption. 2 days after that, I noticed the phone started living face down. On the kitchen counter, on the nightstand, even next to her yoga mat. The notification still came in, soft vibrations, quick glances. But she never picked it up when I was in the room. Never opened her screen unless she was angled just far enough away. I watched, made mental notes. Patterns, timing, frequency. Her gym schedule changed next. She used to go in the morning, part of a predictable rhythm. Now she was suddenly an evening person, off at odd hours, always with a light excuse. A different instructor I really like, or it's less crowded after work. She'd come home glowing, flushed in a way that didn't match the effort level she described. And she always showered immediately, slipping into something loose and clean before greeting me again. Like she'd been rewinding herself before stepping back into the narrative of us. I didn't ask questions. I poured her wine. I smiled when she talked about traffic or playlists or whatever podcast had kept her company. She assumed silence meant blindness, but I wasn't unaware. I was watching the walls of our house tilt, and I was measuring the slope of each one. One night she dropped her gym bag by the door and said, "You know, you've been really calm through all this. It means a lot." I kept my tone even. I said I'd support your growth. She smiled, kissed my cheek, then walked off to shower. But that night, I didn't sleep beside her. I sat in the den for hours, going over her words, her body language, her choices, the careful omissions, the small adjustments she didn't think I'd clock. She wasn't asking permission. She was asking forgiveness in advance. She thought she'd disarmed me with transparency, when all she'd done was leave breadcrumbs in plain sight. Every honest word was pre-edited. She was sculpting the truth before I ever heard it. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something colder, clearer. She had taken her first step away from us, dressed it in therapy language, and handed it to me like a gift. So I gave her mine, in silence. I started with myself. I didn't announce it. I didn't make speeches or demand reciprocity. I simply shifted. Not away from her, but inward, back to center. The version of me that had been quieted, softened, edited down to make room for her needs, her image, her plan. The next morning, I made myself a real breakfast: eggs, toast, fresh fruit. No quick cereal bowl, no grabbing her leftovers. She came down groggy, surprised. "Wow, you cooked?" I nodded. Felt like starting the day differently. She hovered, uncertain whether to ask for a plate. I didn't offer. She poured her coffee and watched me from the doorway, maybe wondering when that small version of me, the predictable, accommodating version, had started closing up shop. By the end of the week, I'd shifted my work schedule to carve out time for myself. Took walks without saying where. Booked a solo massage. Put in headphones and reclaimed silence when she tried to initiate small talk. I wasn't punishing her. I was pulling my energy out of the narrative she thought she could control. She'd played her opening move. She just hadn't realized I wasn't standing still. I didn't change everything at once. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I adjusted the frame one corner at a time. Subtle, intentional shifts she couldn't track until the picture looked unfamiliar. First, I stopped lingering in shared spaces. When I was home, I was present, but not available. No hovering in the kitchen while she talked through her day. No nodding from the couch while she recited gossip from her group chat. I started wearing noise-canceling headphones in the evenings. She'd speak, and I'd pretend not to hear, until she waved or touched my shoulder. Then I'd pause the music, lift one side, and say, "Sorry, what?" Small things, but the kind you feel in your bones when someone is no longer orbiting you. She noticed faster than I thought she would. One night, after I came back from a solo dinner, a quiet place I used to visit before we moved in together, she looked up from the couch and asked, "Were you with someone?" I blinked slowly, then said with full calm, "Yeah, myself." She tried to laugh. "That's not what I meant." I shrugged out of my coat. "That's the answer you're getting." She tilted her head. "You've been different lately." I met her eyes. "You said you wanted perspective, so I'm getting some." That ended the conversation. She didn't push, but I saw the ripple behind her smile. She was expecting tolerance, maybe indulgence. What she hadn't expected was detachment. She thought I'd either compete or cave. I did neither. I reclaimed. I revived old hobbies, not performatively, but because I genuinely missed them. I spent 2 weekends restoring my motorcycle in the garage. Didn't mention it, didn't post about it, just got my hands dirty, remembered the quiet satisfaction of fixing something mechanical instead of emotional. I started grooming differently, cleaner shaves, sharper lines, cologne I used to wear before she told me it was a bit much. She noticed that one. You smell different, she said as I passed her one morning. I didn't stop walking. Feels more like me. She lingered in the hallway that day, watched me leave without asking where I was headed. I didn't offer it either. That was the new rule. I didn't chase, didn't explain. She'd asked to date other people. I decided to date the part of myself she left in storage. The shift didn't go unnoticed for long. She started texting more during the day. Nothing deep, just small check-ins. How's your day? You seem quiet lately. Want to do dinner Friday? I answered with equal brevity. Productive. Just thinking. Already have plans. She started coming home earlier, wearing softer clothes, playing music she knew I liked, but she never addressed what was changing between us directly. That would have required vulnerability, and she wasn't ready for that. She wanted control, not clarity, and she was losing it. One evening, while I was folding laundry in the bedroom, she leaned in the doorway and asked, "Are you seeing someone?" I didn't look up from the shirt in my hands. "Are you asking because you're curious, or because you're threatened?" She blinked. "Is there a difference?" I finally met her gaze. "Only one of those gets a real answer." She hesitated, then turned and left. That night, I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, scrolling through her messages with her bottom lip caught between her teeth. She looked up when I walked in, then tucked the phone away quickly. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "You seem tense," I said. She forced a smile. "Just tired." But I could see it now. She wasn't gliding. She was adjusting, trying to recalibrate the power she thought she'd hold when she made her proposal. It was unraveling, because I hadn't just played along. I'd started becoming someone she didn't recognize, and worse, someone who didn't need her to. By mid-month, the gap between us was no longer subtle. It was a quiet canyon she couldn't cross with charm or muscle memory. I started spending entire evenings away. Not under false pretenses, not sneaking. I just left. Dinner with coworkers she'd never met. A photography exhibit downtown. Even a late-night jazz bar I used to visit before we got serious. When she asked where I'd been, I kept my answers precise but dry. Dinner. Clearing my head. Out. Nothing volunteered. Nothing defensive. Just the same cool tone she used when she first floated the idea of stepping outside our marriage like it was an intellectual exercise. One Friday afternoon, I packed a weekend bag and left it by the door before she got home. When she walked in and saw it, her voice lifted just slightly. "Where are you going?" I zipped the bag shut slowly. "Away for a few days. Somewhere quiet." She crossed her arms, shifted her weight. "You're going alone?" I looked her in the eyes. "Why does that surprise you?" "I didn't say I was surprised." "But you are." She didn't speak for a long second. Then, softer. "You've been really distant." I slid the strap over my shoulder. "You said we should explore?" "I'm taking the advice seriously." I left before she could craft a reply. That weekend, I didn't post a single thing. Didn't text. Didn't perform. I just drove upstate, found a small inn by the lake, and spent 2 days reading, walking, thinking. I didn't spend time with anyone else. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. The space. The absence of her narrative clinging to my choices. By the time I came home, she was waiting in the living room like she'd rehearsed a welcome back scene. Dressed deliberately casual, curled on the couch with a throw blanket and 2 glasses of wine on the table, one poured for me. "You didn't check in," she said as I walked through the door. I set down my bag. "Didn't know I was supposed to." "I didn't say you had to. I just thought." She trailed off. I didn't sit. She studied me, the tension just beneath her skin now fully visible. This wasn't the version of me she thought she could manage. This wasn't the quiet, flexible man who adjusted around her needs like furniture. "You seem different," she said finally. I nodded. "I am." And she hated that answer. She'd begun her exploration with the safety net of a man she assumed would stay put, hold steady, play the anchor. But I had let go, quietly, cleanly. And now she was drifting without a fallback. The unraveling didn't come with shouting. It came with small fractures. She started probing more. Asking who I was with, what I was doing, who I was texting. I never lied. I just didn't elaborate. That's what honesty looks like when you're no longer trying to be understood. Then came the moment she couldn't ignore. She found a message on my phone. I'd left it face up, deliberately, on the nightstand while I showered. She couldn't help herself. The message was from a woman named Elise, a new colleague from a conference I'd attended a few weeks back. The message wasn't flirtatious. It was thoughtful, warm. She had shared a book recommendation and asked a sharp question about something I'd mentioned over dinner. When I stepped out of the bathroom, drying my hands with a towel, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the phone. "Who's Elise?" I didn't grab for the phone. I didn't rush to explain. "She's someone who listens when I speak." Her jaw tightened. "Are you seeing her?" I looked down, met her eyes with the calm she used to admire. "You said date other people?" "I'm not rushing into anything. I'm just remembering what it's like to be seen." She stood slowly. "So that's it?" "No," I said. "That's the beginning." She left the room in silence. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Just unburdened. She had pitched an idea without imagining its return. And now she was learning what it felt like to lose the one person who never wanted to compete. Just to feel whole. Her unraveling didn't come like a storm. It came like fog, slow, creeping, confused by its own arrival. She started waking up earlier than usual, fixing breakfast she never ate, offering me coffee in the exact way I used to make it for her. The rituals flipped, her attempts to reel me back stitched into familiar motions, now awkward in her hands. "Thought you might want this," she said one morning, setting a perfectly made cup beside my laptop. I looked up briefly. "Thanks," she lingered. "You still take it the same?" I didn't answer. I just took a sip, then went back to typing. The taste was slightly off. She'd forgotten the cinnamon. But I didn't correct her. She was performing connection. But I wasn't auditioning. A week after the Elise message, she suggested dinner. Just us, no rules, no tension. "Reset," she said, trying to make the words sound casual. "Like we clear the board and figure out what we both want." I looked at her across the table. She'd dressed carefully, makeup precise, neckline just noticeable. She laughed at the waiter's jokes too loudly, asked about my work with real effort. But none of it could mask the panic beneath her poise. "What do you want?" I asked, not as a challenge, just a prompt. She hesitated. "I want us. But better. Smarter. Less stuck." I sipped my drink. "You didn't want us 3 weeks ago." "I wanted space. I thought it would help. I didn't think we'd fall apart over it." I held her gaze. "We didn't fall apart. You unhooked something. I just stopped holding it up." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "So you're really not angry?" "No," I said. "I'm just done wanting something that doesn't want me back in full." She reached for my hand across the table, and I let her hold it. Not because I believed her, because I wanted to know if she could feel what was missing. She looked relieved, but her eyes searched mine for something that wasn't there. That night she tried again. Brushed against me in the kitchen. Laughed more than she meant to. Wore one of the new pieces she'd hidden in that shopping bag weeks ago. But when her fingers traced along my arm, I didn't move. "I miss you," she said, voice lower now. I met her eyes. "You miss control." That froze her. I added, "You thought you could step away without risk. You called it growth so I wouldn't see the threat." Her face cracked. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's accurate." She took a breath, eyes moist. But I didn't press. I walked away instead. She didn't follow. The next morning, the real twist came. Not from her lips, but from a friend of a friend who didn't know I was supposed to still be in the dark. Apparently, the man she'd been exploring with was a former colleague. Married. Older. Wealthy enough to impress. Detached enough to keep her feeling special without ever promising anything. And now, that man had cut it off. His wife had found messages. There were warnings about consequences from his home life. The connection, quiet, convenient, and kept in the shadows, had backfired on him, and he'd run. Just like that, her other option evaporated. I saw it in her face before I ever confirmed it. The absence of confidence. The sudden cling to normalcy. She started cooking again. Asked if I wanted to rewatch old movies. Brought up vacations we once talked about. But it all sounded like reaching across a bridge that no longer existed. One night, I found her sitting on the edge of our bed, eyes red, traces of smudged mascara around her eyes. She looked up at me as I entered. "I made a mistake. I didn't sit. I believed you, I said quietly. When you said you wanted to grow, I thought maybe we'd find our way back from that. But I realized now you weren't asking to grow. You were asking for permission to leave without consequences. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Tears welled. Not theatrical, just real, raw. But I didn't move toward her. I'd stopped trying to catch something that jumped. That night, I slept in the guest room. She didn't knock. We ended where we began, at the kitchen table. Same chairs, same worn placemats, but this time, no wine. No soft lighting or pretense of ease. Just two people sitting across from each other, too much unspoken between them to feign anything else. She was already there when I walked in, waiting, hands folded in front of her like she was preparing for a verdict. Her eyes were swollen but dry. Not defiant anymore. Just tired. I wanted to talk, she said, barely above a whisper. I sat. Let the silence stretch. She reached for a strand of hair behind her ear. It was a nervous habit, one I hadn't seen since we first started dating. Back when she still cared how she appeared in my eyes. I've been thinking, she started. Maybe we should reset. Clean slate. I didn't move. Resetting assumes we're starting from the same place. She exhaled sharply, tried again. I know I pushed too hard. I got caught up in an idea, one that didn't work. I thought it would make things clearer. It did, I said. She blinked. What? It made things very clear. Her voice cracked. So that's it? You're just done? I looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, I felt a strange kind of grief, not for her, but for who I was before all this. The version of me who might have still bent if she asked the right way. But he wasn't sitting at this table anymore. I'm not angry, I said. I'm grateful. Her eyebrows pulled together. Grateful? You showed me who you were, who I was to you. And now I finally know what freedom feels like. She shook her head slowly, like she couldn't quite process the shift. So there's nothing left? I leaned back slightly. You asked to date other people? I didn't, but I did meet someone. She flinched, then steadied. Is it serious? I smiled faintly. It's me. I met me again. Her bottom lip trembled. I added, I didn't fall for someone else. I just stopped falling for the version of me you tolerated. For a long time, neither of us spoke. And then, quietly, I pulled a small envelope from my jacket and placed it on the table. A formal agreement to begin our separation. Already signed. No dramatic flourish. No vindictiveness. Just legal clarity. She looked down at it like it might burn her fingers. You already. I didn't need more time. I needed peace. Her shoulders sagged. She looked smaller somehow. Not broken. Just real, she whispered. I thought you'd come back. I know. I didn't expect to lose you. I didn't expect to find myself. She didn't cry, not loudly. Just sat there as the reality anchored into her posture. She wasn't in control anymore. And the version of me who once needed her approval was gone. When I stood, she didn't stop me. Didn't plead. She just said, You really meant it. From the beginning. I paused at the doorway. I didn't at first, but you helped me get there. And then I left her sitting there, not as punishment, but because there was simply nothing left to salvage. No rage. No rescue. Just closure, signed in silence. I moved out within the week. No dramatics. No suitcases thrown into trunks. I hired a moving service while she was at work and took only what was mine. Left the walls clean. Didn't leave a note. She texted twice that day. First, let me know you're okay. Then later, it feels real now. I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to feel the silence, not out of cruelty, but clarity. This was what truth sounded like when it no longer needed to be justified. In public, I kept my calm. Mutual friends asked careful questions. One pulled me aside after a meeting. Is everything okay with you too? I nodded. We're in a different place now. He didn't push. Just gave that quiet, knowing nod people reserve for the kind of breakups that don't leave shattered glass, just closed doors and echoes. She tried to re-enter gently at first. A photo sent to my phone, an old vacation spot, the two of us smiling into the camera like a happy lie. No caption. Then a message 2 weeks later. I had a dream about you last night, and later still. Do you ever think about what we had? I read them. I didn't answer. There was no anger left. Just distance, and dignity. What she never grasped was that the greatest shift hadn't been between us, it had been within me. I no longer needed her to understand. I no longer needed to win an argument she'd stopped showing up to months ago.